So this lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to set up the repositories in order to start communicating and changing reading data from our database. So we have two different scenarios. Maybe you want to change something in the database, update something, delete something, create something, or maybe you want to read something from the database. And that's what we're going to use the repository for. So behind the scenes, these repositories are already pre-built for us to take care of all the basic CRUD functionality that we're used to. So we can create, read, update, and delete. And let's just try and use those this lesson and just try and show you how we can kind of work with our code to change our code so we can use these basic repositories. And again, I'm not satisfied until we got a clean architecture back, so we will look at custom repositories later. Just check for a later post if you want to kind of dive into that one. Not this lesson, however. This lesson we're going to focus on just using the pre-built stuff that's already in there. Now, in order to start using these pre-built repositories, we're going to have to actually add this line right here inside our chat module. So let's just try and go and do that. I'm going to my chat module right here, and there we go. And in the chat module, I'm going to add an imports right here because I want to start importing something. Imports. I'll do just square brackets. I'll do a comma to show there's a new line after. And I'll just import this guy right here, the TypeORM module. There we go. So now with this in place, we need to do one more thing. We are not going to use an entity called post. We're actually going to use an entity called client. Now, by the way, while I remember, if this doesn't work for you, try and go and check the database module and make sure that you actually did remember to import that client right here inside the entities when you set up the actual TypeORM in your database setup. Back to the chat module. When this is in place, the next step we want to do is we actually want to go into our chat service and start using a repository. So what I'll do is I'll go back right here, and we need to have a constructor, and there we need to inject the repository that we just set up right here. And again, remember, there's a lot of magic going on. Of course, it's not real magic. It's just hidden code that you don't kind of see. So what I'll do right here is I'll add a constructor, and then by adding this inject repository right here and explaining that we want to inject the client repository like this, client, and actually also adding this one right here, import that one. And the final thing right here, notice it's not going to be client entity, it's just going to be client because I'm not using a schema for my actual entities. I think he's doing that in the guide. He doesn't show that anywhere, but it seems he's doing that because these classes are different. So this might be an entity where this is just a schema. We'll get back to that later, but just ignore it for now and just write client and client in both areas. The final thing I want to do is I just want to call this the client repository right here. And now we have everything up and running. So we can start using that repository right here instead of actually, as we do right now, save all our data right here in memory. So now that this is dependency injected, we're just going to try and make a small test to see if it actually works. How do we do that? Well, let's actually go to the add client and say when we add a client, instead of just pushing it right here to the local in-memory list, let's actually try and create it inside the database. So what I'll do first is I'll just going to, for now, comment these two out. They're not going to be used anymore. Instead, what I'll do is I'll make just a small client right here, and I'll just use this .repository. We'll talk more about these different commands that we're going to do as we move forward. I'll call the create command, and that'll actually go and create a client for the database. So if we go to DataGrip, what it'll do is it'll actually create one of these guys right here from the table. It'll create one with ID and nickname right out of the box for me, so we know how they should look. They should have an ID of the type number and a nickname of the type varchar. Let's try and go back. Now with this available, what we can do is we can say client.nickname equals, and then we'll just pass in that nickname we get right here. Now the final thing I want to do is save it, so I'll do a this.clientRepository.save right here, and I'll pass in that client right there. And that should actually be enough to save it. Now right now I'm ignoring things like actually promises, but we'll look into that soon. But let's just try and see if this actually works so we can start saving the clients into our actual databases right here. Let's try and go back and just open our code, refresh the page and write bill right here and see if we actually get something to the database. Nothing seemed to happen, but I think that's actually okay because I didn't ask the system to do anything right now. I just wanted to test if it could save. Let's try and go to our database. I'll right click my data source right here. I'll say edit data. And I'll just refresh the table, and there we go. We have bill available with the ID of 1. So actually it did work. Let's just try and add another guy. Let's try and add John right here with a minus in front of him, it seems. There we go. Now we have John. Let's try and refresh our database again. By the way, Control R, Command R actually refreshes the data. Pretty neat shortcut. And there we go. Now we have John available as well. What does this mean? This means that our database is running, and it means that we actually have access to the database, and it means we can start adding clients. Now, of course, We have a lot of work to do to make this work properly, but still, we just proved that our database is actually working right now. So I'm going to end the video here. Now you guys know how you can actually connect to the database and how we can kind of dependency inject a new repository into our system by using the default setup that is ready for you with TypeORM and NestJS. So that's it for this lesson. See you next time. Bye.